The pounding on my garage door was so violent, I thought someone was trying to break in. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when the shouting started. Through the window, I saw her, Patricia Dalton, our HOA president, face red, eyes wild, screaming about a stolen car. Her son Tyler stood behind her, smirking like he owned the street. Then she yelled the words that almost made me laugh. "The police are already on their way." I took one last sip of coffee, clipped my badge to my belt, and walked to the front door. If Patricia thought she was about to humiliate me, she was in for the shock of her life. Because the thief she just called the cops on was the chief of police himself. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. 3 weeks earlier, everything seemed perfect. After 20 years of apartment living, I finally bought my first home in Riverside Heights, a quiet, picture-perfect neighborhood where every lawn looked copy-pasted and every mailbox matched. I'd just been promoted to chief of police, and for the first time in my career, I wanted peace, not paperwork, not politics, just peace. The house wasn't anything fancy, but the garage? That was sacred ground. Inside sat my pride and joy, a 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429, painted in grabber blue, every bolt and panel restored by hand. It wasn't just a car. It was the last thing I ever built with my father before cancer took him. Every time I wiped the chrome or turned the key, it felt like hearing his voice again, proud, steady, alive. I'd only taken it out 3 times since moving in. Each time, the neighborhood stopped to stare. Most people waved, some asked questions. But not everyone admired it. 4 houses down lived Patricia Dalton, the self-appointed ruler of Riverside Heights, and her 17-year-old son, Tyler, the kind of kid who thought the world owed him something. The first day I met Patricia, she didn't say hello. She handed me a 3-inch binder labeled HOA Guidelines and Expectations and told me my moving truck had been parked 2 minutes past the approved unloading window. Her voice was sharp, her smile fake, and her words rehearsed. "We run a tight ship here, Mr. Morrison. I trust you'll be a compliant addition to our community." I smiled, nodded, and said nothing about my job. She didn't know I was the chief of police, and at the time, I thought keeping that to myself would make life easier. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. It didn't take long to realize that Patricia Dalton wasn't just an HOA president, she was a self-crowned queen. Every morning, she marched her perfectly ironed white pants up and down the street like she was inspecting troops. If the trash can wasn't lined up perfectly with the curb, she'd take pictures. If someone's mailbox flag was the wrong color, she'd file a complaint. And her favorite subject of complaint quickly became me. The trouble started one quiet afternoon while I was detailing the Mustang in my garage. I had music playing, the door open, the sun hitting that grabber blue paint just right, a perfect Saturday. That's when Tyler Dalton strutted up my driveway like he owned it. Designer sneakers, backwards cap, phone in hand, every inch of him screamed entitlement. "Sweet ride," he said, running his hand along the fender. I politely moved his hand away. "Just finished waxing that spot," I told him. He smirked. "You should let me take it for a spin. I'm a great driver." I almost laughed. "How long you been driving?" "A month," he said proudly. A 17-year-old with a month of experience asking to drive a 400-horsepower classic muscle car. I shook my head. "Sorry, son. This one doesn't leave the garage unless I'm driving." His face twisted. "My dad pays a lot in HOA fees. That basically makes us part owners of this street. So technically, this is kinda my car too." I stared at him for a moment, wondering if he was joking. He wasn't. "That's not how property ownership works," I said evenly. He scowled. "We'll see about that," he muttered, storming off. 20 minutes later, there was another knock on my door, sharp, deliberate, and angry. There she was again, Patricia, now dressed in a blazer with an HOA pin like she was attending a board meeting. "Mr. Morrison," she began, "my son tells me you were quite rude to him." That was the moment I realized, this wasn't just about a car. This was about control. And Patricia Dalton hated anyone she couldn't control. Patricia stood on my porch like she was about to deliver a court ruling. White blazer, HOA pin gleaming, clipboard in hand. Even her perfume smelled expensive and aggressive. "Mr. Morrison," she began, her voice dripping with authority she didn't actually have, "my son tells me you refused to let him test drive your vehicle." I blinked. "That's correct." Her lips pressed into a razor-thin smile. "Tyler is a responsible young man. When he shows interest in something, it's only neighborly to accommodate him. We're a community here." "Ma'am," I said calmly, "that's a vintage muscle car worth more than most people's annual salary. I don't let anyone drive it." She straightened, clearly not used to being told no. "Well," she sniffed, "we'll have to review whether that vehicle even complies with HOA standards. Noise levels, paint color, possible safety violations." I raised an eyebrow. "It's a car, not a nightclub." Her face twitched. "We'll see about that." Then she turned and marched off, heels stabbing the concrete with every step. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next week, I started receiving violation notices, each one more ridiculous than the last. One said my car was too loud, even though it hadn't left the garage. Another claimed the bright paint might distract drivers. My personal favorite, the Mustang, was classified as a commercial racing vehicle. Every morning, a new notice appeared in my mailbox, signed in the same looping handwriting, "Patricia Dalton, HOA President." I responded to each one with documented proof from the HOA bylaws. Perfectly polite. Perfectly legal. It only made her angrier. By Friday, I caught her parked across the street, staring at my house through tinted windows, probably waiting to catch me breaking a rule that didn't exist. That's when I realized something important. Patricia wasn't enforcing HOA rules anymore, she was declaring war. And I was about to show her that she'd picked the wrong man to fight. By the second week, it stopped being annoying and started feeling personal. Every morning when I opened my curtains, there she was. Patricia Dalton. Phone in hand. Pretending to jog, pretending to check her mailbox, always watching. Then came the letters. Neatly folded, hand-delivered, and signed, but written in the same perfect cursive. "You're ruining the peace of this neighborhood. Sell the car or move. We don't want your kind of people here." That last line stuck with me. My kind of people? I wasn't sure if she meant cops, or just anyone who didn't bow to her rules. The next day, I found tire tracks on my driveway. Fresh. I checked my garage cameras, nothing. Someone had spray painted over the lens. That's when I knew she wasn't working alone. Her son, Tyler. Later that night, around midnight, I heard laughter outside, two voices, running footsteps, a metallic clang. I rushed out and found my Mustang's side mirror hanging by a wire. A rock lay nearby with a note taped to it. "Should have let me drive it." The next morning, Patricia was already outside, sipping coffee like she'd been waiting for me. When she saw me staring at the damage, she smiled. "So unfortunate, Mr. Morrison. Maybe if that vehicle wasn't such an eyesore, it wouldn't attract trouble." I clenched my jaw but stayed silent. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I filed a police report, anonymously at first. But when I signed it, my badge number automatically appeared on the system. Within hours, word spread across the HOA board, Chief of Police Morrison wasn't just a new resident, he was the law. That evening, I noticed the gossip shift. Neighbors whispered, blinds peaked, Patricia's smile finally cracked. But she didn't back down. People like Patricia never do. If anything, she doubled down. She called an emergency HOA meeting, one to discuss neighborhood safety concerns. I didn't need to guess who the topic of discussion would be. She wanted a showdown. And I was ready to give her one. The HOA meeting was held on a Thursday evening, inside the community clubhouse, a spotless, over-decorated room that smelled like fake flowers and ego. I walked in quietly, wearing plain clothes, not my uniform. But the moment I stepped through the door, every conversation died. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, curious, cold, judgmental. At the front, Patricia stood behind a podium like she was hosting a trial. "Mr. Morrison," she said, that thin smile back in place, "thank you for joining us. We were just discussing the disruptive presence of your vehicle." I took a seat. "Disruptive?" I repeated calmly. She nodded. "Yes. Multiple neighbors have complained about noise, fumes, and intimidation." A few people nodded uncertainly, the kind of folks who feared crossing her more than they feared being wrong. Then she clicked a remote, and the projector behind her lit up, showing photos of my Mustang, my driveway, even me washing the car. Each one zoomed in like evidence from a crime scene. "Do you deny these?" she asked. I leaned forward. "Those photos were taken from my property line, without permission. That's harassment." Her smile twitched. "We have every right to ensure compliance." I could feel my pulse tightening. Compliance doesn't include trespassing or vandalizing someone's car. Her tone sharpened. "Are you accusing my son?" I met her eyes. "I'm stating facts." The room went still. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop spinning. Then, Tyler, slouched in the back row, muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe if you weren't such a jerk, no one would have touched your stupid car." That did it. I stood, walked straight toward him, and said quietly, "Son, you're lucky I'm not dealing with this in uniform." Patricia shot up from behind the podium. "Are you threatening my child?" I looked around the room, every neighbor watching, every whisper silenced. "No," I said evenly. "But I am promising you both something, this ends now." Then I walked out. The sound of my boots echoed across the polished floor, and behind me, Patricia's voice trembled with a mix of rage and fear. She'd wanted control. What she got instead was resistance. After that HOA meeting, the neighborhood was never the same. People stopped waving when I drove by. Conversations that used to happen on front lawns now ended the moment I stepped outside. Even the kids, who'd once stopped to stare at the Mustang, suddenly kept their distance. Patricia had done what she did best, turn fear into loyalty. Within days, she sent out a community alert email, one filled with vague warnings about certain residents causing unrest. She never mentioned my name, but she didn't need to. Everyone knew. The whispers grew louder. Neighbors who'd once borrowed my tools or chatted about sports now avoided eye contact. One morning, I found my garbage bins kicked over and a note taped to my mailbox. "HOA protects us. You don't belong here." That night, I caught Tyler and two of his friends standing across the street, shining flashlights into my garage. When I stepped outside, they bolted, laughing the whole way down the block. The next day, Patricia filed another noise complaint. She claimed my security camera alerts were disturbing the peace. It would have been almost funny if it weren't so dangerous. Because that same week, my wife, who worked late shifts at the hospital, started getting followed. A white SUV trailed her home twice. When she told me, something inside me snapped. I reviewed every minute of footage from our home cameras, and sure enough, the same SUV passed by our house 3 nights in a row. Always slow. Always stopping near the driveway. I reported it, but the HOA blocked my attempts to install additional lighting, citing aesthetic disruption. It was no longer about the car. It wasn't even about the HOA anymore. It was about control and intimidation. By the third week, tension gripped the entire street like static before a storm. Neighbors were choosing sides. Patricia was feeding the flames. And Tyler was becoming bolder by the day. Something was coming. I could feel it in my gut, that quiet, deadly calm before everything breaks. The pounding on my garage door sounded like someone was trying to break it down with a sledgehammer. I set down my coffee, already knowing who it was. Through the window, Patricia Dalton stood outside, red-faced, hair wild, shouting something about a stolen vehicle. Behind her, Tyler smirked, phone in hand, recording everything. "Open this door immediately," Patricia shrieked. "I know you're hiding stolen property. The police are on their way." I almost laughed. If only she knew. Instead of opening the garage, I clipped my badge to my belt and stepped out the front door. The moment Patricia saw me, the color drained from her face. What is that?" she stammered. "My badge," I said calmly. "Chief of Police, Riverside City." Before she could respond, the sound of sirens echoed down the street, 3 patrol cars rolling up, lights flashing blue and red against the white HOA houses. Patricia's triumphant expression returned. "There," she screamed, pointing at me. "That's him. That's the thief. Impound the car." The first officer out of the car froze when he saw me. "Chief Morrison," he said, eyes wide. "Morning, Martinez," I said evenly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Patricia blinked, confusion replacing fury. "Chief? What do you mean, Chief?" The second officer stepped forward, voice firm but careful. "Ma'am, this is Chief Morrison. He's our boss." The silence that followed was absolute. Tyler's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the pavement. Richard, her husband, arrived moments later, looking like he wanted to evaporate. But the registration," Patricia stammered. "I checked. It's not even in his name." "It's under my father's," I said quietly. "He passed away 6 months ago. I've been restoring his car, the one we built together. You'd have known that if you'd asked instead of accusing." Martinez took out his notepad. "Sir, would you like to file a report?" "Yes," I said. "False 911 call. Harassment. Trespassing." Patricia's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" "No, I didn't mean." "You called emergency services to settle a personal grudge," I said evenly. "That's a crime." Tyler tried to speak, but the rookie officer was already recording with his body cam. "Go ahead, son," I said. "Tell them how your mother thought she could use the police to take what wasn't hers." Tyler's mouth opened, but no words came. Across the street, neighbors had gathered, phones out, recording every second. The queen of the HOA, dethroned in front of her kingdom. Martinez handed Patricia the citation. "False police report. Misuse of emergency services. You'll receive a summons." Patricia's hands trembled as she took it. This is ridiculous," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "This is justice." By the next morning, the entire neighborhood knew what had happened. You couldn't walk 5 feet in Riverside Heights without hearing Patricia Dalton's name whispered behind hedges and porch railings. Someone, no one ever admitted who, leaked the body cam footage. Within 48 hours, it was everywhere. Entitled HOA President Calls Cops on Police Chief. The headline spread across every social media platform like wildfire. Clips of Patricia shouting about stolen property played on loop, while the moment her face froze at the word chief became instant meme material. Tyler's angry outburst, "My mom runs this neighborhood," got remixed into a dozen TikToks. Neighbors who once feared Patricia were now laughing at her online. The mighty queen of Riverside Heights had become a global punchline. At the emergency HOA meeting the following night, the room was packed. Dozens of residents, people who'd quietly endured Patricia's petty rules for years, finally had their moment. One by one, they stood up and told their stories. The woman she fined for hanging Halloween lights too early. The retired veteran she threatened over an American flag. The single mother she embarrassed for having non-approved lawn furniture. By the time it was over, Patricia wasn't just defeated, she was exposed. The vote was unanimous. Effective immediately, Patricia Dalton was removed as HOA president and permanently barred from holding any board position in Riverside Heights. As she stood to leave, the silence in the room was heavy. Her once perfect posture was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of someone who'd lost everything she thought made her powerful. "You'll regret this," she said weakly, voice trembling. "I made this neighborhood what it is." Janet, my ever-blunt next-door neighbor, stood and replied, "No, Patricia. You made this neighborhood miserable. Now maybe we can make it livable." The room broke into quiet applause. Patricia's husband, Richard, followed her out without a word, his face pale and tired. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign appeared on their front lawn. By the end of the month, they were gone. The city fined Patricia $1,000 and ordered 50 hours of community service for filing a false police report. When she appeared in court, Judge Hendricks didn't hold back. "Mrs. Dalton," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You claim to be protecting your community, yet you endangered it by weaponizing law enforcement for personal vendetta. That is not concern. That is arrogance." The courtroom was silent as he added, "Consider yourself lucky I'm not adding jail time." Outside, cameras waited. Patricia kept her head down as reporters shouted questions, the once feared HOA president now reduced to a symbol of humiliation. As for me, I spent that evening in my garage, polishing the Mustang, the same way my father and I used to. For the first time in weeks, the neighborhood was quiet. Not the uneasy silence of fear, but the calm that follows after a storm finally passes. A month later, Riverside Heights felt like a different place. Kids played in the cul-de-sacs again. Neighbors who once looked down at their feet when I passed now waved, some even stopping to chat. Without Patricia's shadow looming over everyone, the community finally began to breathe. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment, it's about restoration. About showing people that power doesn't come from titles, rules, or threats, it comes from integrity. Patricia's downfall wasn't something I celebrated. I didn't gloat or post about it online. I didn't need to. The truth had done that for me. One evening, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just a short note written in shaky handwriting. I went too far. I thought control meant respect. I was wrong. Patricia. I folded it, set it aside, and said a quiet prayer for her. Not out of pity, but out of closure. That night, I took the Mustang out for a drive, first time since the chaos ended. The sunset glowed on the horizon, the rumble of the V8 echoing down quiet streets that finally felt like home. In the rearview mirror, the HOA sign flickered under a new banner. Riverside Heights, a community that cares. And for the first time since I moved in, I actually believed it. So if there's one thing this story proves, it's that arrogance always meets its reckoning, and truth always finds the light. Patricia tried to use power to control people. In the end, that same power exposed her. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. Because sometimes, karma doesn't knock. It kicks the door down.